time for overtime. Ready for this? In the world of sport, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Now to Giannis. Giannis with 50 in 2 of his last 3 now. Pulls up. 15-footer. Yes, sir!
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime. Now with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO. Sioux Falls sports leader.
Welcome into another beautiful Thursday here of Overtime. Dustin Baker has made his voyage in. We are ready to rumble with Vikings news, NFL news, a disappointing night for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and so much more. Welcome into this Thursday, May 23rd edition of Overtime. I'm your host, Bert Ramin, alongside from me, Dustin Baker. You can find him at Vikes Now, at Viking Territory, at Dust Baker. He's all over the place on Twitter and VikingsTerritory.com. Yours truly, at Bert ESPN. Pretty darn simple there. Email address if you want to weigh in there, Bert at ESPNSiouxFalls.com. And as always, the ESPN hotline number, I would personally have it saved in my phone for weighing in, for contesting with us, 605-362-3776. A lot to get to from the Minnesota Vikings, including some juicy rumors and some juicy narratives out there in regards to Dalton Reisner, Justin Jefferson, J.J. McCarthy. There's so much juice out there this time of year. We'll break it all down and also talk about some rising quarterbacks this season. Dustin and I at the end of hour number 1. It's graduation day. It's graduation time. College, high school, preschool, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, and beyond. Congratulations to all you graduates out there. And Dustin and I are going to go ahead and preemptively congratulate 3 quarterbacks this season on their graduation into new roles, into new stratospheres, or something a little bit off the block here. And Dustin, what I mean here is a quarterback going from the top 20 to the top 10, a quarterback going from top 5 to top 1, or a quarterback that's a rookie, maybe, just maybe, getting a little bit better this season. We'll save that graduation day segment for the end of hour number 1. And again, congratulations to all graduates out there, including a couple of Dustin's kiddos making the leap into their next grades, and my son Patrick now on to kindergarten. It's a big deal in my household, as his dad wasn't too shabby in preschool either. I don't know about the rest of the grades, but congratulations, Patrick, Stone, and Violet, our kiddos here making the jump to the next level. Headlines of the day coming at noon. Dan Hayes of The Athletic talking Twins baseball at 12:20. Latest from the NBA, the odds shift after the win for Boston, after the win for Dallas on the road at Target Center last night. Can Indiana bounce back in Game 2? That spread has been all over the place over the last 24 hours. We'll tell you where it stands right now and the latest spread for Game 2 from the Twin Cities. Round out the show with the good, the bad, the ugly. We got it all for you today on this Thursday edition of Overtime. It was Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals in the NHL last night, and this one ended up being pretty darn lopsided.
In Verhaeghe, he'll play one across Gus Forsling. Over the Rangers line. Dropped it off. Tkachuk. A shot. He scores! Matthew Tkachuk from the top of the left circle. And the Panthers are on the board with 3:34 to go here in the opening frame.
Matthew Tkachuk scored a goal, had an assist, and Florida beats up the Rangers 3-0 in Game 1. Panthers take that 1-0 lead. Western Conference Finals start tonight. Oilers at Stars from Dallas. Game 1, a 7:30 puck drop. You can watch it on TNT. Dallas and Minnesota tussled last night. Mavericks got out to a good start. It was the Kyrie Irving show in the first half. It was the Luka Doncic show late, but plenty of other players make the difference for Dallas in a Game 1 stunner in Minnesota.
Luka ahead of the pack into the front court, stops on the left side. Now drives past McDaniels, creates some space, missed the bank. The follow dunk by Lively, middle of the lane. Largest lead for Dallas at 6. The Mavs have scored 11 straight.
Things very interesting in the fourth quarter last night. Back and forth they went. Mavericks squandered a late lead. The Timberwolves squandered a later lead, but Dallas holds on in the end. And Luka Doncic finishes with 33.6 rebounds and 8 assists. Anthony Edwards, arguably his worst postseason game of the season this time around. 19 points, 11 rebounds. He says, frankly,
we came out flat today. We found our energy, then we went back to being flat. So, I think it was just on us. Everything was on us today. I didn't get downhill as much. Yeah, just stuff like that. We was just a little tired probably.
Timberwolves had several opportunities late to ice the game away, win the game. Here's head coach Chris Finch postgame.
We haven't really closed quarters very well, closed halves very well over the last handful of games. It cost us one game in the Denver series, and that certainly had an impact on this game tonight too. So we got to be better in clutch moments.
Dallas hangs on for the road win, an important and frankly stunning win. They weren't a gigantic underdog, but everybody thought the carryover from taking down the defending champion Nuggets would be significant for Minnesota. They drop a big game on their home floor to start it out, 108-105 the final. Again, Luka 33, Anthony Edwards 19. Tonight in the NBA, it's Game 2 between the Pacers and Celtics from Boston, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Mike Wilbon on if the Pacers can turn it around in Game 2.
I think they gave the series away because I just don't know that you recover even emotionally from something like that. The team made all kinds of mistakes. They turned it over 21, 22 times. Yeah. Rick Carlisle said, put it on me. There's a bushel full of mistakes. They gave it away. They should be up 1-0 on a team that doesn't handle pressure well, that would have been under immediate pressure, the Celtics. Instead, they let them off the hook.
Pacers at Celtics Game 2, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Boston leads that series 1-0. That's Mike Wilbon of ESPN. Major League Baseball finals. The Braves continue to beat up the Cubs. 9-2 the final yesterday from Wrigley. Chicago's record 27-23. Minnesota Twins have a winning streak, people, as they take care of business against D.C.
And Correa unloads to left, and Winker can't play deep enough for this one. That'll rattle around in the empty blue seats. It's a home run for Carlos Correa and a 2-0 Twins lead.
3-2 would be the final yesterday. Minnesota now winners of 2 in a row, 26-23 the record. Steven Okert with the win, his first of the year. Johan Duran with the save, his fourth of the season. Other finals from Major League Baseball. Cleveland over the Mets 6-3. St. Louis wins at home against Baltimore 3-1. Battle of AL Central foes, Detroit and Kansas City. From Kansas City, Royals continue their surge. They win at 8-3. New record for KC is 32-19. Other notable finals, Milwaukee dropped a low-scoring affair in Miami 1-0. And Toronto beats up on the White Sox 9-2. Lastly, extra innings, and the Rockies hang on for a win in 12.
Next pitch to McMahon. Hit well to right field. Going back is Nevin to the track, and it's gone! Towering shot hit by Ryan McMahon to right field, and the Rockies have taken, in the top of the 12th inning, a 4-2 lead.
4-3 would be the final. Rockies almost blew it again, but they did not. 12 innings the victory. Their 16th of the season. Colorado is now 16-32. Today and tonight in Major League Baseball, Cubs and Braves do it again from Wrigley early. It's a 1:20 start time. Rockies at A's again, 2:30. Blue Jays at Tigers, 5:40. White Sox play host to the Orioles at 6:40 this evening. Minnesota off today. They begin a series at home against the Rangers beginning tomorrow. 6:30 pregame, 7:10 the official start time for Friday night baseball from Target Field. WNBA, things continue to be ugly for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. They squander one of their better performances of the year, losing in Seattle yesterday 85-83. Clark goes for 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists in the loss. Tonight in the WNBA, Minnesota in action out in Connecticut battling the Sun. That is a 6 o'clock start time. And as we welcome Dustin Baker into the show, I got a clip for him, NFL related, to react to. Michelle Smallman always has these ideas. This one might be a big-time hot take as for a potential MVP this season. Give it a listen. Big-name quarterback reigning supreme once again.
I think Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP after the 2024 season. I don't know if the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl, and I know he's coming off a pretty tough injury, and he's age 40. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is still one of the greatest throwers of the football that we've ever seen. I look at this Jets roster, and they have so much talent. Aaron Rodgers is his best self when he has something to prove. And who has more to prove in the NFL this year than Aaron Rodgers and the Jets? I think we're going to see a different version of him, and I think he's going to be great this year. Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP award.
Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP. I'm trying to look up the odds right now because I frankly don't know exactly where they lie, but that's pretty out there, I think, right now. I like the Jets, but Aaron Rodgers for MVP. What do you think, Dustin?
No, I would not put my money on that. Not because I think he's going to suck or anything of the sort. It's a couple reasons why I would, if forced to bet on this, I'd choose somebody else like Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. It's because there's so much unknown about age and injury. It wouldn't be weird at all if Rodgers just isn't quite the same or if he gets hurt again. So that's the first problem with her theory is I wouldn't put my eggs in that basket because the age and the injury are there. And then, secondarily, the Jets' defense does a lot of the heavy lifting. I often watched Jets games last year and smirked and really thought, God, all they really need is a quarterback, and they would be good. So I think Rodgers will fit in that offense like a glove, but I don't think it's going to be like 40 touchdowns. And then last, and maybe most important, is over the last 3 years, Rodgers has kind of devolved into a strange character, at least for some of his takes about general life and politics. And I don't know that voters will want to vote on a guy like that if it's a hot-button race between Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers. It might be an easy excuse to say, we got voter fatigue. We already voted for you twice in a row a couple of years ago, and you're flat-out weird. So we're going to go with Josh Allen. I don't think that Rodgers' best case scenario for 2024 is going to be far and above the stat lines that will be produced by Burrow, Allen, and Mahomes.
And I don't think Rodgers is frankly going to need to have the MVP numbers in that offense if that offense turns out being pretty good. The guy to me that's going to have those numbers is Breece Hall. I think he's fantastic. I think he can do it all out of the backfield. Garrett Wilson, big year. Mike Williams, a bunch of touchdowns. And Rodgers could go for 25, 28, 32 touchdowns through the air, but the MVP usually has 40, 45, 50 touchdowns through the air combined. Patrick Mahomes, MVP favorite, plus 600. Josh Allen up there. Then Burrow, Stroud, Jackson, Jordan Love. Sixth best odds for MVP, tied there with Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, and then Aaron Rodgers, the 11th best odds for MVP, plus 1,600. Just a little bit better than Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and one Anthony Richardson. So as we crank it up here on this Thursday, Vikings Twitter all over the place. I saw some Dalton Reisner stuff that they were looking to lean into Blake Brando and that Reisner's agent was trying to drum up the interest with Minnesota because Dalton apparently wants to be there is the report that I saw. And I've also seen some other things this week. Justin Jefferson, all sorts of different stuff. Wild week for Minnesota, but all things considered, interesting time of year, I think.
Yeah, Reisner, I think the hinge right now is money. Last year, because he didn't sign until mid or late September, they were able to get him for cheap. And that poor guy, back-to-back free agencies last year and this year, he's just been ignored. Now he has Drew Rosenhaus representing him, so, it's a super agent. So it makes sense that he's getting a little more attention. And I ultimately think he'll sign somewhere. I think the Dolphins make sense. The 49ers make sense. The Ravens have been chirked about by a couple outfits. There's still a chance that we get to training camp and preseason and the coaching staff for the Vikings is like, maybe Blake Brandel isn't that good. Let's just go get Reisner. I don't know if they have the time to wait on that. Reisner is a marvelous pass protector. His run blocking is kind of sus, and I think that's why the Vikings want a more complete guard eventually, whether that's Brandel or not. We'd all welcome Reisner back, but I think right now it's just if he wants a moderate starting left guard salary, which is probably like, $5, $6, $7 million. And the Vikings, in their mind right now, can get by with just Blake Brandel. If you look at the style of offense the Vikings run, kind of that Shanahan feel, a lot of times those Shanahan offense just have like turnstile guards. It doesn't matter. You don't need Quentin Nelson or something. So keep that in mind, Vikings fans, that O'Connell and, people of his ilk, sometimes you can just skimp by at guard and it really doesn't matter a whole lot.
Dustin Baker in for us for the entirety of hour number one each and every Thursday here on Overtime. We'll have a rocky couple weeks ahead. I got some PTO next week. You're out of the country on a cool bucket list trip the week after that, and I think also the week after that. So we'll try to squeeze in as much Vikings talk as we possibly can for you starved purple and gold fanatics out there. Other news in terms of sights and sounds from camp. You get to see a lot of these guys running around in drills, making throws, pass rush, whatever. What has stood out to you from the initial pictures and video you've seen from camp?
Yeah, when we get to the next segment, I got a laundry list of Vikings news items that I'll bring up, but foremost, I'll touch on the OTA stuff. It's encouraging to see that J.J. McCarthy has the zip that we thought he had from Michigan. You'll recall leading up to the draft, there was a lot of folks that wondered, is this guy just a game manager? He never had to put a team on his back and throw it 40 times. Well, it's not his fault. That's the Harbaugh way. Justin Herbert might find that this season that he's not, necessarily a gunslinger. But McCarthy so far has the juice. But on the other side of that coin, I think that the masses are starting to understand that McCarthy could totally dazzle everybody this summer, but Sam Darnold is going to be the quarterback, in my predictive opinion, week 1. Now, that might not last for longer than 3 or 4 weeks, but they signed Darnold for a reason, and even though McCarthy has looked pretty good at OTAs, I think there is maybe a transformation among fans that's starting to realize that this is probably going to be Darnold to start the season, because otherwise, why did you sign him?
Yeah, we're going to take an early break here in a second, but I did want to get your take on one more thing I saw from Viking circles. They're always so good about it, whether it's Vikings media
I thought of you.
or people. The draft room is just so open for Minnesota. It's like watching a documentary in real time. Minnesota stands pat for their guys, Juergens and the kicker, Reichert, I believe is his last name, in late day 3. But everything that went into it, you saw the interview with J.J. McCarthy as well. Hey, I'd run through a brick wall for you guys. Anybody in purple and gold? What did you glean from those videos? Because that's got to be pretty fun as a fan to be able to be behind the scenes. Because speaking as a Packer fan, there is no behind the scenes in Green Bay. They've always been that way. They always will be that way. I love the team, love the franchise, but they don't do things that way. But it's cool to see how open Minnesota is with sharing the videos and even the interview videos with the quarterback. And I'm sure they wouldn't share those with somebody that didn't go on to be their quarterback. But pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that video link, I thought of you, because since I've known you, you've talked about how the Vikings do a wonderful job showing the behind-the-scenes footage, and this was no outlier. I was writing a Vikings article. My day, believe it or not, is pretty regimented. I'm writing all damn day, but as soon as I saw the link for that, I stopped what I was doing so I could watch all 18 minutes, and they're so candid and revealing behind the scenes. I recommend all Vikings fans watch it. It's 18 and a half minutes of this draft. Their thinking, their interviews, how it all shook down. They didn't leave anything to the imagination. In that video, you could glean that the kicker, like Will Reichert, was their guy, which kind of means that the guy they signed, Parker Romo, is the odd man out. So, they kind of spill the beans on their plans, but it took you through how they totally called the Giants' bluff about drafting a quarterback during the draft lead-up. We thought, oh my goodness, are the Giants going to really kind of be done with Daniel Jones and select J.J. McCarthy? The video revealed that they didn't really buy that whatsoever. It showed that he had Joe Douglas, the Jets GM, on speed dial so that he could have that deal ready because he thought McCarthy was falling. And then it took you through their late-round draft process. Kwesi talking with his staff about, hey, do you think we can wait? Do you think we have to draft this guy now? They talked about Walter Rouse, and I met Walter Rouse on StreamYard the other night on my show, Vikes Now, and he's a real cool dude. So their process of identifying, collaborating, and ultimately selecting all their draft picks is really for everybody to see in a 18-minute video.
Really cool stuff. Best place to find that, Vikings.com or somewhere else?
Go to their YouTube channel. I think that's featured on there right now. And just generally speaking, the Vikings social media team, when they're not releasing a schedule, that was underwhelming. But when they're publishing the video, they're really good at their craft.
All sorts of Minnesota Vikings news ahead, including maybe some troubling news for the 2022 Minnesota Vikings draft class. We'll dive into that, so much more. I'm also going to pick your brain about Walter Rouse, where he could fit in, what you got from him, his personality, potential on the Vikings offensive line. That's coming up next. Latest Vikings news, everything you need to know coming up next. From a Minnesota Vikings perspective, Dustin Baker in for the entirety of hour number 1, overtime on a Thursday.
Overtime is in the middle of your workday. Unwrap your sandwich and get caught up with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
You're tuned into the Thursday edition of Overtime right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. Ever miss any of the show, including our weekly hour with Dustin Baker? Podcast links easily findable, easily accessible at ESPNSiouxFalls.com or on the free ESPN Sioux Falls app. Vikes Now is one of many media outlets where Dustin Baker spends his time. Walter Rouse, the rookie offensive lineman of the Minnesota Vikings, recently joined that show. Dustin, tell us about the conversation and some takeaways for you and anyone else that had the opportunity to interview Walter Rouse.
He is a new Vikings offensive tackle. He came from Stanford and the University of Oklahoma. He spent last year at Oklahoma. And I asked him a couple of things. Most notably that I was curious about is per Pro Football Focus. He was the second best pass protecting tackle in all of football. And it's not like he went to some rink-a-dink school. This was at Oklahoma.
Yep.
And I probably stupidly asked him, so why are you a sixth rounder if you have that stat? Unsurprisingly, he didn't know the answer. And he said he just took it with grace and that whenever he was picked, he was picked. He's from Maryland, so he's a Commanders fan. He was elated to be picked by the Vikings. One of his coaches at Oklahoma is Phil Lodeholt. And Phil Lodeholt was the Vikings' right tackle for many years. And so Lodeholt just went nuts that the Vikings drafted his guy. So it was fascinating to get to know him. He's a really smart dude. It sounded like he wanted to be, or I guess still could, be a doctor, but he's also a really good football player. There was some smoke that said he has versatility that could play guard. I saw that on dailynorseman.com, and I was like, this would be a huge guard. This guy's 6'6" and 300. And I asked him about that, and he said, yeah, if the Vikings need me to play guard, I can play guard. Realistically, his versatility would be to play right tackle on a depth chart because he's organically a left guard at Oklahoma. But it was real fascinating to get to know him. He's excited to be in the Twin Cities. It was also kind of funny. You have to take into account these guys' youth. I talked about Bryant McKinney, how I have a show with Bryant McKinney, and I don't think he knew who that was. And for me, I'm 40, and Bryant McKinney, before I even met him, was just a mainstay of my Vikings memories. The guy's huge and he's good. So I name-dropped McKinney, and I don't think he knew who the hell that was. On the whole, he was a wonderful young man. I think he's only about 22, 23. And if the Vikings need him, it sounds like he's going to be ready.
And it's going to be interesting. That could be a very underrated pick in this year's draft. Speaking of draft classes, 2022 first-year draft for Kwesi and that Vikings front office. Andrew Booth early, Lewis Seen earlier. Both those guys in trouble potentially to be cut, and reports yesterday indicate that they didn't run with the first-team defense. Not a surprise, but certainly kind of more piling on these two guys in what could be a pretty tough draft class from 2022 for the Vikes.
Yeah, Seen is more of a risk for a summer cut. Not because, he absolutely is terrible. It's because the Vikings safety room is established without him, and they proved that last year. So this guy broke his leg about, 20 months ago or so. And allegedly he recovered just fine, but then when 2023 rolled around, he didn't really play until it was garbage time versus a beatdown of your Packers. And right now, there's just really not a spot in the safety room for him. So I would agree that he'll be on the roster bubble. Andrew Booth, I'm a little bit more fascinated with because when he played last year, which was about 100 coverage snaps, he was good. He had like a 68-something PFF ranking, and I strategically and specifically watched him when he was on the field because I want to know, is this guy good? And to me, he played well. The cornerback room isn't as deep as the safety room, so we can spin our wheels and say, hey, both of those guys are flunkies. They're going to be cut. Seen is more likely to be cut, in my opinion. I still think Booth can win a roster job and maybe even a starter's job because Minnesota right now has a unique defensive back situation, especially at cornerback, where they have tons of guys, and a lot of them are decent. They just don't have one standout stud, and that leads me to believe that Booth can still make the team. Ultimately, that 2022 draft is mired in controversy. Kwesi still had Rick Spielman's scouts, and the draft since seem like they're okay. But yeah, we got to monitor both those guys to figure out if anything will come of them.
And again, it takes years and years for drafts to show their true faces, but 2022, as of right now, not super great, but we'll wait and see. Still some life left in those picks and others. On the defensive side, before we dive into the news that people need to know from this week from Vikings territory, on the defensive side, how would you grade the units? I want to ask you from the defensive line pass rush. I'm asking for A, B, C, D, E, or A, B, C, D, F. Excuse me, see how I did in school. A, B, C, D, F on the defensive line pass rush, 1 unit. Linebacking core, 1 unit. And the entire defensive backfield. What's the strongest? What's the weakest? What are the grades there?
All right, so let's do up front. We're including outside linebackers, right? Edges. Yep. All right, that's probably a B+ right now. You can't get rid of Danielle Hunter and go into this scot-free and thinking, hey, we're awesome. But they did get a bunch of dudes in relief or replacement of Hunter from Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, Jihad Ward, and the undrafted guy we talked about, Gabriel Murphy. So they got a lot of beef to replace Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport and DJ Wanham. So I would call that a B+ in terms of upside. And all that takes to get to an A- is either Grenard replicating his success from last year or Dallas Turner being the real deal. And we really need him to be the real deal because that guy was expensive via trade. Linebackers got to be an A-. Ivan Pace was wonderful last year. logic would suggest he's only going to get better. And then Blake Cashman had a wonderful season with the Texans, and he's more of a coverage linebacker, better than Jordan Hicks was at that task last year. And the way Brian Flores does things, it's usually just 2 linebackers in the middle of the defense because he has so many defensive backs. So A- for the off-ball guys. And then the secondary, if you're going to do that on the whole, is that what we're doing?
Yep.
Ooh, that's probably a C+, B- until Mekhi Blackman, Andrew Booth, Kyrie Jackson, until one of those young guys breaks out, if ever, and becomes a quasi-Pro Bowler or at least somebody that's habitually startable. It's a weakness, and that's mainly a grievance with the cornerbacks because there's just a bunch of them. There's no stars. Now, safety, there's a lot of depth there. Josh Metellus, Cameron Bynum, Harrison Smith, Lewis Cine, if you still believe in him, Jay Ward from last year's draft. So the secondary, because it's kind of all blended together by Flores, I'd say B-, C+. It can easily get in that B- range if one of the cornerbacks turns out to be pretty darn good.
Minnesota Vikings, that's pretty darn candid there. I appreciate the grades, especially I agree with you on the secondary. That's the big area of concern if I was looking at that defense, if it was one of my teams, but definitely not. Let's look a little bit here. Other Vikings news, what do you got for us this week on things that move the needle?
There's a bunch. Also on that secondary, they ranked 32nd in the NFL per completion percentage allowed last year. So that's why I feel vindicated in giving them anything in a C range is because they allowed a lot of completions last year. All right, the news was rough and tumble. Robert Tonyan is a Viking. I know you covered that.
Oh, yeah.
But
I sent you a text right away.
Yeah, he's now, he needs to get an NFC North tattoo. That's what he needs to do because he's played for every one of those teams. So he's in the house, probably a TE2, TE3, a red zone guy with Hawkinson, presumably not going to be ready to start the season. It's always exciting when former Packers take the plunge. The WR3 debate is alive and well between Trent Sherfield, Jalen Naylor, and Brandon Powell. It's been kind of weird. NFL.com projected starters. They said, hey, Trent Sherfield's in the driver's seat. The Athletic covered OTAs this week and said Jalen Naylor's looking pretty hot. That'd be their pick for WR3. And then ESPN.com, Kevin Seifert was asked in a group article about the NFC North to pick a surprise Viking who's going to bust out this year. He picked Brandon Powell. So it's all over the board per folks' opinion on WR3. We also had the stupid Justin Jefferson rumor from ML Football. It's an aggregator account that posted footage of him getting out of like a taxi or an Uber or something.
In New York City.
Yep. And it said, hey, the Jets headquarters is 4 miles, 4 minutes or something from there. Is Jefferson meeting with the Jets? How dumb do you have to believe that a football player with a contract just goes and chats with other teams about trades? That would be tampering that even the Falcons couldn't pull off. So, In reality, Jefferson is resolving a legal matter on that side of the country, and that's why he was in New Jersey, reportedly. But yeah, Jefferson's not going to get traded, especially he's not going to meet with the Jets about it. TJ Hawkinson is at OTAs, which is kind of cool because he is recovering from that torn ACL. And a lot of times those guys just don't show up to those events. But ever the culture guy, Hawkinson is there. He also said, since we last chatted, there's no real timetable on his recovery. Nobody's putting a date on it, which again leads me to believe that a PUP list assignment is upcoming. There was also some Zapruder footage of Cam Akers working out at the Vikings facility. He would make all the sense in the world to come back on a really small deal and add running back depth behind Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. That was before that Zapruder film came out, that was my bold prediction for the Vikings summer in a Vikings territory article last week, is that they signed Cam Akers back. And then I think kind of concluding or going back to the first segment, I feel that even the biggest J.J. McCarthy guys and gals are starting to realize that, yeah, he's probably going to be good, but he's not going to be the week one starter. There's been credible voices like Ben Lieber, who played for the Vikings, that has kind of circled early December as a J.J. McCarthy start date. And then Paul Allen said this week on his K-Fan show, his bold prediction, that's designed to be out there, is that Sam Darnold starts every game for the 2024 Vikings, which would probably mean he's pretty good, let's hope. But I think that the world is starting to realize that J.J. McCarthy certainly has the upsize and will take the QB1 baton, but it may not be right away in 2024.
All sorts of interesting news. Appreciate the recap there. Robert Tonyan to the Minnesota Vikings. That one breaks my heart a little bit. I really did like Tonyan in Green Bay. He had an incredible 2020 season, 11 touchdowns, 580 receiving yards. Since that time, though, 4 total touchdowns and just north of 700 receiving yards over 3 seasons. Last year was signed to the Chicago Bears, had an opportunity to be in the mix with Cole Kmet and others, including Mercedes Lewis, another ex-Packer on the Bears last year. And last year, 17 games appeared in. He wasn't hurt. 6 starts for Tonyan, 11 total catches, 112 yards. So your tight end room right now, it's Hockenson and Oliver are 1-2. Is that correct? So if I'm looking at that and just judging on what I've seen from Tunyan's career, I don't think Tunyan's going to be the TE2. I think he's got a shot to beat out the Muses and the other guys, Johnny Muntz of the world there at tight end 3. Vikings have just trotted in those guys and kind of churned the bottom of that position. I think Tonyan could fit there, but I'll tell you what you're getting in him. Extraordinarily likable person, likable player. Not big, not fast, not strong, not a great blocker, not a great catcher, but he's pretty darn consistent in what he does. And what I mean by that, I'm not insulting the guy. I think he did a really great job, undrafted, small school, broke out of the roster for Green Bay, had a great career with the Packers, including an 11 touchdown season. That's not a fluke. That is clearly a lot of smoke there in terms of being a good player. But we were always waiting in Green Bay for him to develop into that big blocker that Mercedes Lewis was. We wanted to see the baton handoff, and it just never happened. Tonyan battled some injuries and was working on some resurgence at times. But I don't think you're going to get a tight end 1. You're not going to get that 2 tight end complement. But Tonyan, in a pinch, like you said, if Hawkinson's out, I anticipate him making the roster, being that guy for you guys. So I think that's a decent dice roll on a cheap contract.
Yeah, and TJ Hawkinson was excited about it. He tweeted the obligatory LFG, LFG Bobby. So I guess they know each other. And yes, so the tight end room, if you want to exclude Hawkinson for a while, would be Josh Oliver, who they signed for a handsome price tag about 14 months ago. And then it gets a little bit interpretive. So it'll probably be Johnny Munt because Kevin O'Connell really likes him. And then TE3, in my opinion, would be Tonyan, Nick Muse to the practice squad. And they have that South American basketball player, Samus Reyes.
And you guys got Trey Knox.
Yeah. So, this is just like the cornerback room. They got a lot of guys. We'll see who emerges. I think sometimes, like that season with Tonyan you talked about, Hall of Fame quarterbacks will identify an unsung guy, and that becomes their guy. In 2009, with Brett Favre and the Vikings, it was Shante Shanko, and I remember thinking
got PTSD from him.
Yeah, I remember thinking like, oh man, this guy's sweet. And then it was only just a year thing. There was a dude for the Broncos during Peyton Manning's heyday that had like oodles of production. And then
Julius Thomas?
Yeah, then he went to the Jaguars, and fantasy football participants can tell you he did nothing there. So there's a lot of time where these GOAT quarterbacks can make tight ends look really good. And Tonyan might be good, but I think Rodgers really did the thing in that 2020 season.
What's really interesting there is Rodgers historically, not really much of a throw to the tight end kind of quarterback. You look at your Michael Finley, that's just about it. And then in recent memory, Martellus Bennett, nope. Mercedes Lewis, not really a pass catcher. But it's been up and down for Rodgers. We'll see exactly what's ahead for Robert Tonyan, but that's the latest signing for the Minnesota Vikings. When we come back, we'll dive into some broader NFL topics, including one quarterback back out on the field and progressing, and Lamar Jackson doing something that I think is a gigantic mistake ahead of the 2024 NFL season. We'll dish on that and more coming up next on Overtime.
You want more of Overtime? Podcast free with the app or online at ESPN Sioux Falls. Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Right back with you on this Thursday, May 23rd edition for Overtime. Appreciate you being with us as always and joining us on the air. ESPN Sioux Falls, Dustin Baker across from me for his usual hour number 1 on a Thursday. You can find him on Twitter at DustBaker. Content on YouTube, Vikes Now, and VikingsTerritory.com. Now into the NFL. Broader news here. Dak Prescott has pulled a Justin Jefferson saying, I don't play for money. What do you play for, Dak? And you need to be completely and totally reimbursed for what you've done for the Cowboys. We'll wait and see. Prescott's quote, I don't play for money, never have cared for it, to be honest with you. Yeah, would give it up just to play this game, so I would allow that to business people to say what it's worth, what they're supposed to give a quarterback of my play, a person of my play, a leader of my play. For me, it's about, as I've said, to control what I can control and handle that part, and the rest will take care of itself. Prescott is in a contract year, conclusion of a 4-year, $160 million deal that was signed pen to paper back in 2021. Dak Prescott, good move, bad move, saying he doesn't play for money.
When I heard Justin Jefferson say this, it feels like eons ago now.
Yep.
When Justin Jefferson said that, I wonder what their agent thinks. Like, just shut up. What are you thinking? Yep. For Dak, it's a little different because he's established. He has been benefited by a really sweet contract. I think this is trying to prove that he's a team player. Even if this was true, that he doesn't like money, he's still going to get $45-50 million at a minimum. But I actually kind of believe him a little bit.
Me too.
I think that if you know a little bit about him and the relationship that he had with his mom and kind of his emphasis on mental health, I believe him that money isn't his main factor. But to keep up with the Joneses in the NFL, he's still going to have to get a mammoth contract. But I think it's good news if you're a Dak guy or gal or a Cowboys fan that he may not need, by the time he's extended, it'll probably be, my goodness, $65 million or something. He probably won't need that. He might be able to get the Jared Goff contract or a little bit below. So I think it's encouraging news for those who want to prolong Prescott's stay with the Cowboys.
Dak Prescott is, in my purview, the best mid-round quarterback we've seen since Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Could be leaving some out, but Dak Prescott, a 4th-round pick. Isn't it crazy, by the way, as we put that to bed? Dak Prescott, Tony Romo, two guys that have been the best quarterbacks in Dallas over the last 20 years since that 95 end of the dynasty, 96 end of the dynasty, have been an undrafted guy, Tony Romo, small school, and Dak Prescott, who slipped to the 4th round. People thought he was just a running quarterback that could do some things and was a strong leader. They've been the two guys, so the Cowboys have really kind of lucked out being as good as they are at the quarterback position. On to another youngster, younger than Dak for sure. Colts' second-year quarterback Anthony Richardson has learned the road back from a season-ending injury is not always linear. According to ESPN.com, he says, some days I feel amazing, and then some days I wake up like, dang, my shoulder's a little achy, still recovering from the right shoulder surgery last season, but every day I work whenever I finish rehab or I'm in a weight room lifting, it's like, okay, I'm back. Anthony Richardson, what do you think the ceiling is for he and the Colts this year? Because there's a lot to like from his rookie tape.
The only this is kind of what I say about Victor Wembanyama in the NBA. The only thing that's going to undo Anthony Richardson is injury. That, like, when you watch Wemby play, it's supersized. The only thing that could even hint at making him bad or a bust is injury. And I feel similarly for Richardson because he's got the toolkit, he's got the drive to succeed. And then last year in a 4 or 5 game sample, he looked really good, and that was as a really raw rookie. And he didn't play much at Florida compared to other rookie quarterbacks. So on Richardson, he's got good infrastructure there. The Colts always know how to draft well. They have a pretty sound depth chart. And then another quiet factoid that I just realized this week. Did you know Joe Flacco is the backup quarterback there?
Yes, I did.
It's kind of weird that this day and age in the NFL, when you have your starter, you try to have your QB2 as stylistic, similar, like the Browns do a lot of this. And the Colts don't want anything to do with that. You've got two polar opposites in Richardson and Flacco.
So I guess you're trying to hint that the Colts might be bringing in Flacco, the statuiest of statues that ever statued in there to maybe teach Anthony Richardson, maybe don't take off so much. Anthony Richardson last year did a lot of hay on the ground and through the air. Pretty darn decent for the Indianapolis Colts. 2-2 the record, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. Very short season. Now in the stupefying news from the NFL at the quarterback position, get a load of this. And Dustin and I, we chatted during the break. We're already on the same page. The biggest challenge in Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson since he won his second MVP is that there is now less of him. Jackson indicated that he's dropped weight this offseason to, quote, be more agile. Earlier this month, Jackson said he weighed 205 pounds, which is 25 pounds less than 2 years ago and 10 pounds less than last season. And yesterday, Jackson declined to specify his exact weight. Jackson said, I don't really know how many pounds I lost. It's like I'm like 200 pounds right now. But I will say it was important enough just to be able to move around a little bit extra. That's all. Jackson's 27 years old. You and I are on the same page. As a quarterback ages, whether they are an electrifying, dazzling runner and make that a part of their game, you want them to be more durable, and adding weight, adding bulk to the frame, whether it's a bulk in fat, bulk in muscle, or both, is something that probably should be leaned into to protect your franchise, protect your asset here at the quarterback position. I found this to be kind of exactly the opposite of what I think the Ravens should be telling Lamar versus what he's doing, losing weight in preparation for a follow-up to another MVP season. Am I crazy?
No, you're not. I hated this. When I saw this, I had to do a double take because he should be going the other way, as you talked about, because he likes to run the football like a running back. He's also a really good quarterback on top of it who flings it. But if you're going to continue that style of play as you get older, he should be doing the opposite. He should be getting up to about 235, 240 to absorb these hits because he insists on being a ball carrier. And it makes me paranoid because Cam Newton, who is stylistically similar to Jackson in the way that they play. Newton came in the NFL, I believe, in 2010. By the end of the 2016 season, he was not going to be good anymore after that because of the way he played and took those hits and injuries. And Lamar Jackson doesn't have a pristine injury history or anything of the sort. So if you start to do the parallels of the timetable, 2018 is when Lamar came in the league. Boom, we are in 2024. I honestly believe that Lamar Jackson has 1 or 2 seasons to win a Super Bowl for the Ravens before he starts a path like Cam Newton. And that's not a good path in terms of durability or value. I just don't like this at all because he should want to throw the football more as he gets older. And it seems like he's taking a path that says, I want to get faster, more nimble, and be even more of a runner than I've ever been. I wish this tweet would have hit my phone and it said, boom, Lamar Jackson's up to 238. I would have been just tickled.
Yeah, or if he could just hold weight where he was in 2022. Lamar Jackson, by the way, rushing stats over his career, 875 carries in 77 games. So that's over 10 carries a game there. Also, 5,200 yards, 29 scores. He has regressed a little bit in terms of the number of runs per game. He only played 12 games in 2021 and 2022 and carried the football 133 and 112 times, respectively. Last year, 148 totes of the ball in 16 games, way down from his rifling record-setting numbers in 2019-2020, where he was over 1,000 yards on the ground. So he is running just a little bit less, but I'm very surprised with the new-look offense there and what everybody's brought into town, the different kind of techniques that they go with, running backs, double tight, everything with Baltimore, that he's still relying on running the football so much. That's the latest from the broad strokes of the NFL. When we come back, it's time for graduation time. Congratulations to everyone out there. If your kid's graduating, if you're a kid and you're graduating, best of luck into the future, whether it's high school to college, college to the real world, and then, of course, down to the youngsters, kindergarten, preschool, first grade, second grade. Congratulations to our graduates. We're going to congratulate preemptively at least 3 quarterbacks that are going to graduate into the next tier or graduate into some newfound success and freedom in 2024. Coming up next, it's graduation time on Overtime.
Stream us online, stream us on the app. Streaming now. Overtime with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO. Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It's the Thursday edition of Overtime, rounding out our first hour with Dustin Baker. He joins us every single Thursday, except for the next few, because we are out and about. He's overseas, and a lot to look forward to there. Let's play some graduation day, though. 3 quarterbacks apiece now that we think are going to graduate into bigger and better things. I got a little graduation music here for you, Dustin. I think you can hear that. But we're off and running here. Graduation day. Give me your first quarterback that comes to mind as someone that's going to graduate into bigger and better things by the end of the NFL season.
Sure, I have a lot of honorable mentions. I hope I have time to get to those.
Oh, of
we'll
course.
See.
Just read them off like graduation time.
All right, so right now, I ranked these. So at the bottom of my list, but still going to graduate with, a lot of prestige, is Justin Fields. I think he'll take over in Pittsburgh. And because we know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the Steelers are guaranteed to have a winning record when the season is over, Fields is going to be propped up by the QB wins argument. I don't know if he'll win the job outright over Russell Wilson, but he's going to a team that has a winning culture that just can't be discounted because they never have a losing record. I think that Fields will be unlocked to an extent, and people will think highly of him by season's end.
All right, from one Justin to another. You got Justin Fields. Get a load of this. I've got Justin Herbert as a graduate. What the heck do I mean by that? He's already a top 6, top 5 quarterback. I think he's going to go from the hot young name, the really good young passer, the guy that puts up the stats, throws for a zillion yards, to a very efficient, smart, and capable quarterback. Surefire top 5. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to chisel off a little fat there, and I think that the Justin Herberts of the world will become very much more valuable next year and beyond. Well-refined, less interceptions, smarter football, a big-time reduction in stats, but an increase in wins.
Number 2, I have Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. I liked what I saw, his grit, his scrappiness as a rookie last year. He does need to calm down a little bit and not take off and run. And that's just not, it can be his game, but he's going to get hurt. But he showed me enough. We know he has the arm talent. He has the juice. So I think by season's end, we will think Will Levis, like, hey, man, that guy had 27 touchdowns and 3,800 yards, and he's a top 15 quarterback.
Top 15 quarterback right now will be a top 10 quarterback by season's end. One Jordan Love on my list for obvious reasons. I'm a Packers homer, but also a Packer fan and a realist. Jordan Love was a top 10, top 5 quarterback for the final half of last year. He's here to stay. Weapons are older. He's more experienced, better back in the backfield. I love Aaron Jones, but I think Josh Jacobs is an upgrade. I think that the tight ends have gotten better. I think the receivers have gotten better. Offensive line reinforced. Jordan Love will graduate to be a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback this year. On to number 1.
Number 1 for me is, we stepped on this 10 minutes ago, is Anthony Richardson.
Hey, me too.
Yep. Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, well,
that?
We are in unison. I don't think that the injury last year is a signal that he will be injury prone the long term. But I just know that he has the tools, the college scouting report, and the sample size in the NFL to be good. It was just all undone by an injury. Let me get to my honorable mentions when you're done with your number 1.
Well, my number 1 is the same as yours, Anthony Richardson. I think he vaults from the young quarterback with not a whole lot of stats into the top 20, top 15, and that's a marketable jump for him. I think the Colts will know that they have their guy by season's end, and he'll be kind of that fringe Pro Bowler. Do I think that he's going to make the Pro Bowl? Probably not, but I think he'll have the stats definitely to warrant consideration. I'm thinking 22, 23 touchdowns, 10, 12 interceptions, and make some hay on the ground as well. I like the fit, and I like the continued building of weapons in Indy. So Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, my 3, and your 3, Richardson, Levis, and Justin Fields. Give me those honorable mentions.
All right, my honorable mentions are Trevor Lawrence, because right now I think NFL fans are wondering, is this guy mid? Like, is he flat out just average? He had a quieter season than most expected. I think he bounces back and has kind of like a Kirk Cousins stat line, 30 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. And if Trevor Lawrence has it, not Kirk, when Trevor has it, it's like, hey, yeah, this guy's awesome. So I think that Trevor Lawrence won't be on the bubble by, January. I think this isn't a graduation, but I think Baker Mayfield solidifies himself as the quarterback of the Buccaneers and basically goes back to who he was in 2019 when we never questioned whether or not he was good. He didn't have to have a reclamation story. I think it's just kind of like Jared Goff and the Lions. You're like, oh, okay, Baker Mayfield, that's the Bucs quarterback. I think he assimilates into that. And then Bryce Young, I know that guy is good. And I think he was beset by a lot of skullduggery with the Panthers last year. I think he gets back on track. His biggest problem was that C.J. Stroud was so good, so he didn't have any patience when it came to fans. And then finally, I didn't know if it was worthy of Jordan Love being a graduate because he looked so damn good in the playoffs against the Cowboys. But I think we will realize, regrettably, that Love is here to stay.
He is here to stay, and I absolutely love it. Those are your quarterbacks making the graduation jump. Again, congratulations to all the graduates out there, high school, college, or otherwise, all the way down to preschool, daycare. It all matters. Congrats to you parents for making it through another year, and we're on to summer break before we know it. That's your graduates for the quarterbacks in the National Football League. That's Dustin Baker. Already another week gone by, my friend. We'll look to maybe talk to you next week. If not, we'll be off with you for a while. I hope you enjoy the international trip. If we don't talk to you, can't wait to see all the highlights, and best of luck with everything. Thanks as always for the time.
Yeah, if we indeed had this 3 or 4 week drought, by the time we talked again, we'd start to size up training camp, if that can be believed.
It is going to be believed, and there's a lot to look forward to for the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. We're getting into OTAs. Rookie mini camp is behind us. Before long, training camp, Hard Knocks makes its return, and we're geared up and ready to rumble for the 2024 NFL season. We take the break, come back with your headlines and highlights and so much more. Minnesota Twins talk with Dan Hayes of The Athletic. Minnesota Timberwolves talk. They sputtered last night. Can Indiana bounce back in game number 2? Latest odds, and of course, we'll get you the good, the bad, and the ugly before we send you packing on a Thursday.